Inflation isn't just prices going up. It's a decision about who gets to spend first. Picture this, you're in a movie theater. The tickets cost $10. You're about to buy one. Then someone quietly prints a stack of priority passes, hands them to a few people at the front, and lets them grab the best seats before ticket prices update for everyone else. You didn't vote for that, but you're still paying for it. Before we keep going, if you want more scripts like this, calm, skeptical, and built around the real plumbing of money, subscribe. And if you've ever felt like inflation hit you before it showed up in the headlines, drop a comment with the first price you noticed change. Not the theory, the moment it became real. June 2022, U.S. Inflation hit 9.1% year-over-year. Biggest 12-month jump since 1981. That's not an abstract number. That's rent. That's groceries. That's your paycheck losing weight while it's sitting in your bank account. Source here, S why this matters right now. Most people think inflation is a natural disaster, like weather. Unlucky, complicated, nobody's fault. But the uncomfortable truth is, inflation often arrives through a very specific pipeline, and whoever stands closest to the pipeline tends to get richer first. So let's build the system in your head without turning this into a lecture. There are two big ways new money shows up in the economy. The government spends, and the central bank moves money through the financial system. During the pandemic era, the scale was historic. One bill alone, the CARES Act, was roughly $2.2 trillion across spending, tax breaks, loans, and other resources over the next decade. Source now the central bank part. This is where the story gets weird, because it doesn't look like printing at all. When the Federal Reserve does quantitative easing, it buys big piles of financial assets, mainly treasury securities and mortgage-backed securities, by creating bank reserves as the matching liability. Translation: the Fed pays for those assets by crediting the banking system electronically. Source: and the Fed is explicit about something most people suspect but argue about. It buys treasuries from the public on the secondary market, not directly from the U.S. Treasury, and it says those purchases are not a means of financing the federal deficit. Source: but here's the twist. Even if it's not directly funding the deficit, it still changes the money environment you live inside. Because when you create reserves, you're changing what the financial system can do next. Let's put names on the characters. Character 1, the Treasury. It spends, it sends checks, it funds programs, it backstops industries. Character 2, the Fed. It changes financial conditions, how easy it is to borrow, how expensive it is to hold cash, and how much balance sheet capacity banks and markets have. Character 3, banks and markets. They are the transmission mechanism. They decide where credit flows fastest. And character 4, you. You show up at the end of the chain, holding dollars that now have to compete with dollars that didn't exist yesterday. Now we raise the stakes. The Fed's balance sheet hit a historic peak of about $8.96 trillion in April 2022. Source: that number matters because it's basically a receipt, evidence of how aggressively the system expanded liquidity in a short window. Here's the part nobody votes on: the order of who touches the new money first. New money doesn't land evenly on every bank account like a software update. It enters at specific points: large asset sellers, primary dealers, big institutions with access to cheap credit. Then gradually it bleeds outward into mortgages, corporate borrowing, stock buybacks, real estate, and only later into wages and everyday prices. There's an old idea economists talk about. When new money enters unevenly, it changes relative prices first, meaning it creates winners and losers before the headline inflation number even shows up. In plain English, being early is a superpower, being late is a tax. Let's make it painfully concrete. If you own assets, stocks, real estate, anything that gets repriced quickly, your world often improves early. Your balance sheet inflates before your grocery bill does. If you live mostly on wages, your world often gets worse first, because wages are sticky. They renegotiate slowly. Rent doesn't. This is why inflation feels like an argument where one side has a microphone and the other side has a delayed audio feed. Now for the uncomfortable math. Inflation is not just prices rose 9%. It's the purchasing power of money changed. If you held cash during a high inflation year, you effectively paid a silent fee for liquidity. No bill arrives. No vote happens, but it's real. Meanwhile, borrowers can quietly benefit because debts are fixed in nominal terms. If prices and incomes rise, old debt can become easier to pay back in real terms. So inflation can punish savers and help debtors, depending on timing, interest rates, and whether wages keep up. This is where the incentives get awkward. Governments like flexibility. Inflation creates it, not always intentionally, not always cynically. But if you owe a lot, a little inflation can feel convenient. And when the system is built on debt, government debt, mortgage debt, corporate debt, a little inflation becomes less like a problem and more like a tool that sometimes gets tolerated. Now let's cut through the public hype. Public story: inflation is mainly about greedy companies, supply chains, or that one thing everyone's mad about this month. Reality: those can matter. But money and credit conditions shape the entire playing field those battles happen on. And the pipeline matters because it decides who gets purchasing power first and who only finds out when the price tag changes. changes. There's also a subtle absurdity here. The same system can tell you with a straight face, we're fighting inflation, while also paying interest on reserves, managing reverse repos, adjusting liquidity facilities, fine-tuning the plumbing so markets don't break. Source, it's like trying to lower the water level in your basement while simultaneously making sure the pipes don't crack. Zoom out, what happens long-term if people start believing inflation is political? Not in the partisan sense, but in the power sense. They change behavior. They stop trusting cash as a store of value. They chase assets harder. They speculate more, not because they're reckless, because standing still feels like losing. And that can push economies toward a strange cultural norm. Being financially responsible starts to look like being underinvested. And here's the risk nobody likes saying out loud. If the public begins to expect that crises will always be met with money creation, because it's the fastest lever, then the expectation itself changes markets. Risk-taking grows. Asset prices detach. The political pressure to do something gets stronger. And the pipeline, the order of who gets money first, becomes a permanent source of tension. One last detail that makes this even more uncomfortable. You can track money supply measures like M2, published through the Fed's H6 release and distributed by FRED. It's literally a public scoreboard for how the pool of money-like assets changes over time. Source, most people never look at it, but the system does. So when someone says, inflation is just prices, they're missing the real story. Inflation is also distribution. It's also sequencing. It's also power. And the question is just, will inflation go down? The real question is, the next time new money enters the system, who gets to touch it first before the price tags update? And if you want the next episode, because we're going to follow the pipeline all the way upstream, who the first receivers actually are in practice, subscribe now. If you want to test whether this is happening in your life, look at your last 2 years. Did your income reprice as fast as your essentials, or did your assets reprice first? Put one sentence in the comments: wages, assets, or neither.